The crisp autumn morning brought a familiar buzz to Hong Kong International Airport as Sarah Chen adjusted her navy blue uniform in the crew bathroom mirror. At 32, she had spent the last decade working as a flight attendant for Pacific Airlines, mastering the art of perfect service with a genuine smile. Her almond-shaped eyes, although tired from early morning preparations, still sparkled with warmth as she pinned her name tag precisely on her blazer. Flight PA 288 to New York was Sarah's regular route, and she took pride in knowing every detail of the 16-hour journey. As she walked through the terminal towards her pre-flight briefing, her sensible heels clicked against the polished floor, matching the rhythm of travelers rushing to their gates. The morning sunlight streamed through the massive windows, casting long shadows across the terminal's pristine corridors. "Morning, Sarah," called out Captain Williams, a veteran pilot she'd flown with countless times. "Ready for another long haul?" Sarah nodded with a pleasant smile, her perfectly styled hair bouncing slightly. "Always ready, Captain. First class is fully booked today." The pre-flight briefing went smoothly, and soon Sarah was at her position, greeting passengers as they boarded the Boeing 787. She checked her watch, 7:45 a.m. Everything was running exactly on schedule, just the way she liked it. At precisely 8:15 a.m., a tall figure appeared at the entrance of first class. Sarah's practiced eye immediately noticed the perfectly tailored charcoal suit, the platinum watch glinting on his wrist, and the quiet confidence in his stride. Marcus Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, was a name and face she recognized from countless business magazines and news reports. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling." Sarah greeted him professionally, noting how his steel-gray eyes seemed to assess everything around him with careful precision. "May I show you to your seat?" Marcus Sterling nodded curtly, his expression neutral as he followed her to seat 1A. At 45, he carried himself with the authority of someone used to commanding rooms and making billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and despite his obvious wealth, he carried only a sleek leather briefcase. "Would you like a pre-flight beverage, Mr. Sterling?" Sarah asked, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Just water, no ice," he replied, already opening his laptop. Sarah noticed the slight shadows under his eyes, signs of exhaustion that even his expensive lifestyle couldn't hide. As Sarah prepared his water, she observed him discreetly. Unlike many high-profile passengers who demanded attention, Marcus Sterling seemed to prefer isolation. He created an invisible barrier around himself with his focused work and minimal interactions. The flight took off smoothly, climbing into the morning sky above Hong Kong's impressive skyline. Sarah went about her duties with practiced efficiency, serving breakfast, managing passenger requests, and maintaining the calm atmosphere of first class. Every time she passed by Sterling's seat, he was either working intently on his laptop or reading through thick documents marked with red tabs. 3 hours into the flight, the first signs of trouble appeared. Captain Williams's voice crackled over the intercom, warning of approaching turbulence. Sarah began securing the cabin, methodically checking seat belts and collecting glasses. When she reached Marcus Sterling's seat, she noticed his knuckles had whitened slightly as they gripped the armrest. "Sir, please ensure your seatbelt is fastened," she said softly, noting how his laptop screen showed multiple weather radar images. "How bad is it looking?" he asked, his businesslike tone wavering slightly. "Nothing we haven't handled before," Sarah assured him with a calm smile, even as the plane began to shake gently. The turbulence increased gradually, and Sarah took her crew seat, watching the cabin with professional attention. She could see Marcus Sterling's rigid posture, his attempt to maintain composure despite his obvious discomfort with the situation. Little did either of them know that this moment of vulnerability would be the beginning of something neither had expected. As the plane pushed through rough air currents somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, fate was quietly setting the stage for an extraordinary encounter that would change both their lives forever. Neither Sarah Chen, the dedicated flight attendant with dreams bigger than her current role, nor Marcus Sterling, the powerful CEO who had everything except genuine connection, could have predicted how their paths would intertwine in the hours to come. But as the turbulence continued to rock the aircraft, they were both about to learn that life's most significant moments often arrived disguised as ordinary days. The turbulence that had started as a minor inconvenience grew increasingly severe. Inside the Pacific Airlines Boeing 787, Sarah Chen gripped her crew seat tightly as the aircraft pitched and rolled through angry clouds. The plane dropped suddenly, causing several passengers to gasp. Even with her years of experience, Sarah had rarely encountered turbulence this intense. Captain Williams's voice came through the intercom, his usual confident tone now carrying an edge of concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some severe weather conditions. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, secure the cabin and take your seats immediately." Sarah's eyes scanned the first-class cabin, professionally assessing each passenger's state. Most looked uncomfortable, but Marcus Sterling's reaction caught her attention. The usually composed CEO was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched tightly, his breathing noticeably controlled. She had seen this look before. It was the face of someone trying to hide their fear. The next drop was dramatic enough to send a serving cart rolling, despite its locks. Sarah instinctively rose to secure it, moving against the plane's violent motions with practiced skill. As she reached the runaway cart, another sudden drop threw her off balance. She would have fallen if not for a strong hand catching her arm. Marcus Sterling had reflexively reached out from his seat to steady her. Their eyes met briefly. "You should sit down," he said, his voice gruff but concerned. Before Sarah could respond, Captain Williams's voice returned. "Crew, prepare for immediate landing. We're diverting to Anchorage International Airport due to severe weather conditions." The announcement triggered immediate reactions throughout the cabin. Several passengers began pressing their call buttons, while others started loud phone conversations, ignoring the electronic device warnings. The peaceful first-class cabin was quickly becoming chaotic. Sarah watched as Marcus Sterling calmly pulled out his phone, sent what appeared to be a quick text, and then properly turned it off. His composed behavior stood in stark contrast to the growing anxiety around him. As the plane began its descent into Anchorage, Sarah moved efficiently through the cabin, reassuring passengers and explaining the situation. "We'll have you on the ground safely in 20 minutes, she told a particularly anxious elderly woman. "The airline will arrange accommodations and alternate flights." The landing was rough but skillful. As the plane taxied to its gate, Sarah could see the heavy snow through the windows. Anchorage in November was not a planned stop for anyone on board, and she knew the coming hours would be challenging. Once parked, passengers began demanding immediate solutions. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor as she explained the situation repeatedly, coordinating with ground staff through her headset. The airport was already crowded with other diverted flights, and hotel rooms would be scarce. She noticed Marcus Sterling standing quietly near his seat, watching the scene unfold. Unlike other first-class passengers who were loudly demanding immediate solutions, he seemed to be assessing the situation with calculated patience. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah approached him, "ground staff is arranging accommodation, but with multiple diverted flights, it might take some time." He nodded, surprising her with a slight smile. "I've been through worse, though usually not with such capable crew members." His comment about her handling of the runaway cart was unexpected, making Sarah momentarily forget her professional script. The next few hours became increasingly hectic. The airport's limited facilities were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of stranded passengers. Sarah worked tirelessly, helping coordinate with ground staff, arranging meal vouchers, and managing increasingly frustrated travelers. As midnight approached, the situation became clear. There weren't enough hotel rooms for everyone. The airline was converting airport lounges into temporary rest areas, and passengers were being grouped based on availability. Sarah found herself approaching Marcus Sterling again, this time with uncomfortable news. "Mr. Sterling, I apologize, but even first-class passengers will need to share the premium lounge tonight. We simply don't have enough hotel rooms." To her surprise, he shrugged. "Sometimes life puts us all on the same level, doesn't it?" There was something different about his tone now, less corporate, more human. As Sarah watched him gather his belongings, she had no way of knowing that this unplanned stop in Anchorage would become the setting for a conversation that would reshape both their lives. The night ahead would prove that sometimes, the most significant detours in life come disguised as inconveniences. The premium lounge of Anchorage International Airport had been transformed into an impromptu shelter for the night. Despite the late hour, most passengers remained awake, their conversations creating a low murmur that echoed through the space. Sarah Chen had finally finished her duties and changed out of her uniform into simple black pants and a warm sweater she kept in her crew bag for emergencies. The lounge's large windows revealed heavy snow continuing to fall, creating a white curtain that obscured the airport's lights. Inside, passengers had claimed various corners and chairs, creating small territories with their belongings. Marcus Sterling sat alone near the window, his suit jacket now draped over the chair beside him, his laptop closed for once. Sarah approached the coffee station, desperately needing caffeine after the challenging day. As she reached for a cup, her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, causing her to drop it. Before it could clatter to the floor, Marcus caught it mid-fall, having silently appeared beside her. "You look like you could use a break," he said, his voice carrying none of its earlier corporate authority. "Please let me." He gestured toward the coffee machine. Too tired to maintain professional boundaries, Sarah nodded gratefully and sank into a nearby chair. Marcus returned moments later with 2 cups of coffee, offering one to her. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I didn't expect to see you still awake." Marcus settled into the chair across from her, loosening his tie. "Sleep doesn't come easily these days," he admitted, surprising both of them with his candor. "Besides, watching the snow is oddly peaceful." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the snow creating a sense of isolation from the outside world. Sarah noticed how Marcus's usual stern expression had softened, making him appear more approachable. "My mother loved snow," Sarah found herself saying. "She used to say it made the world quiet enough to hear your own thoughts." "Used to?" Marcus asked gently, picking up on the past tense. Sarah nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "She passed away last year. Cancer." She rarely spoke about this with anyone, but something about the strange circumstances and late hour made it feel natural. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and she could tell he meant it. "Cancer's a merciless opponent. My wife and I used to support cancer research before." He trailed off, then added quietly, "before the divorce." Sarah watched as he absent-mindedly twisted the empty space on his left ring finger where a wedding band had once been. "Recent?" she asked. "2 years ago, though my daughter might say it was a long time coming." His voice carried a weight of regret. "She's 17 now, barely speaks to me. Probably thinks I care more about quarterly reports than her life." "Do you?" Sarah asked before she could stop herself. Instead of taking offense, Marcus laughed softly. "Straight to the point. No wonder you handled difficult passengers so well." His expression grew serious. "The truth is, I threw myself into work after Lisa left. It was easier than facing an empty house or a daughter who looked at me like a stranger." Sarah thought about her own father, who had disappeared into his work after her mother's diagnosis. Sometimes the hardest distance to cross is the one we create ourselves. Marcus looked at her with newfound interest. "You sound like you speak from experience." "My mother's illness taught me a lot," Sarah admitted. "I actually started planning a support foundation for families affected by cancer. Something to help them navigate the practical parts: bills, meals, transportation to treatments. The things nobody warns you about." "That's remarkably thoughtful," Marcus said, studying her with genuine curiosity. "Have you started implementing it?" Sarah shook her head. "Still in the planning stages. Turns out good intentions don't pay for permits and paperwork." Their conversation was interrupted by a maintenance worker accidentally dropping a ladder, causing a loud clash that made several passengers jump. The noise seemed to break the spell of intimacy that had settled around them, reminding them of where they were. Yet something had shifted between them. As they sat there, a billionaire CEO and a flight attendant both realized they had shared more truth in the past hour than they had with anyone in months. The snow continued to fall outside, creating a cocoon around the airport, as if giving them permission to temporarily step out of their usual roles and just be 2 people sharing their stories in the quiet of an Alaskan night. As midnight shifted into early morning, the lounge grew quieter. Most passengers had finally succumbed to sleep, sprawled across chairs or curled up in corners. Sarah and Marcus remained awake, their conversation flowing with surprising ease. They had moved to a more secluded area near the window, where the falling snow created an intimate atmosphere. "Tell me more about your foundation idea," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. His tie was now completely removed, and his usually perfect hair showed signs of the long day. What made you think of it? Sarah pulled out a small notebook from her bag, its pages filled with neat handwriting and detailed plans. During Mom's treatment, I saw so many families struggling. Not just emotionally, but with basic things. She flipped through the pages. Some couldn't afford parking at the hospital. Others missed medications because they couldn't manage the pharmacy runs between work shifts. Marcus moved his chair closer to look at her notes. "You've really thought this through," he observed, scanning the detailed lists and budgets she had created. His business mind automatically began analyzing the potential. "I know it might seem small compared to what you deal with," Sarah said, suddenly self-conscious about sharing her plans with someone who managed billions in assets. "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference." He paused, seeming to wrestle with a memory. "When Lisa was leaving, my daughter Emma left a note. She wrote that she couldn't remember the last time I attended one of her school plays. Small things, big consequences." Sarah watched as Marcus stood up and walked to the window, his reflection mixed with the swirling snow outside. "Have you tried reaching out to her?" she asked gently. "I send gifts, pay for everything she needs. Her college fund could support 3 PhDs, he said, then added quietly, "but I haven't actually spoken to her in months." "Gifts aren't the same as presents," Sarah said, thinking of her own father. "After Mom got sick, my dad bought me everything I asked for, but all I wanted was for him to sit with us during chemotherapy." Marcus turned back to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way that would have shocked his board members. "How do you rebuild something you've broken?" "One small step at a time," Sarah replied. "Maybe start by asking about her day, really asking, not just checking a parental duty box." A notification sound from Marcus's phone broke the moment. He glanced at it, then unexpectedly chuckled. "Speaking of Emma, she just posted about being stuck in her school library studying for finals. Says it's literally the worst night ever." He shook his head. If she only knew where her father was right now. "Tell her," Sarah suggested. "It might make her laugh." Marcus considered this, then slowly typed out a message. "Just told her I'm stranded in Alaska with a flight attendant who's teaching me how to be a better father." He looked up at Sarah. "Too honest." "Honesty is a good place to start," she replied with a warm smile. They spent the next hour talking about Emma, with Marcus showing Sarah photos on his phone. His daughter had his eyes in her mother's smile, and despite his mistakes, his face lit up when he talked about her achievements in theater and debate club. In return, Sarah shared more about her foundation plans, growing animated as she described her vision for support groups and practical assistance programs. Marcus listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that helped her see gaps in her planning she hadn't considered. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "you got something here that could really work. It's not just about money. It's about understanding what people actually need in their worst moments." "That's exactly it," Sarah agreed eagerly. "Big charities do amazing work, but sometimes people just need someone to deliver groceries or sit with them during treatment." As they talked, neither noticed how their chairs had gradually moved closer, or how their coffee cups had long gone cold. The snow continued its silent dance outside, and the first tints of dawn began to lighten the Alaskan sky. In the strange liminal space of the airport lounge, a billionaire CEO and a flight attendant had found something neither expected: understanding. The first rays of morning sunlight began to pierce through the heavy Alaskan clouds, casting a soft golden glow across the airport lounge. Most passengers were still asleep, creating small islands of quiet breathing throughout the space. Sarah and Marcus had moved to the lounge's small dining area, where they were sharing a breakfast of vending machine snacks and surprisingly decent coffee. "You should see your face when you talk about the foundation," Marcus said, breaking a granola bar in half and offering part to Sarah. "It's like watching someone describe their life's purpose." Sarah accepted the offered snack, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Is it that obvious? I probably sound naive, especially to someone like you who deals with major charitable foundations all the time." Marcus shook his head, his expression serious. "Actually, what you're proposing is exactly what's often missing in large-scale charitable operations. The human touch, the understanding of real needs." He paused, seeming to consider something carefully. "I want to help you build it." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "What?" "Your foundation," Marcus continued, his business mindset now clearly engaged. It's not just a good idea, it's necessary. And with the right structure and support, it could help thousands of families. Mr. Sterling. Sarah started. Marcus, he corrected gently. After sharing vending machine breakfast and life stories, I think we can drop the formalities. Sarah smiled despite herself. Marcus, then, it's a generous offer, but I couldn't accept. Think of it as an investment, he interrupted, pulling out his phone and opening his calendar. I have connections with medical centers across the country. We could start with a pilot program in 3 cities, gather data on the most needed services, and scale from there. As he spoke, Sarah watched his face transform with the same enthusiasm she'd seen when she discussed her plans. The corporate mask had completely fallen away, replaced by genuine excitement. In return, Sarah said slowly, I have a condition of my own. Marcus looked up from his phone, surprised. Oh, let me help you reconnect with Emma. The words came out before she could second-guess them. Not with gifts or money, but really reconnect. Marcus fell silent, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. I wouldn't know where to start, he admitted finally. Her school plays, Sarah suggested. You mentioned she's in theater. When's her next performance? Marcus scrolled through his phone, then stopped. There's one next month. The Glass Menagerie. Start there, Sarah said firmly. Clear your schedule, sit in the front row, and actually watch her perform. No emails, no calls, no distractions. The board meeting in Tokyo. Marcus muttered, then stopped himself. Can be handled via video conference, he finished, making a decision. You're right. Emma's more important. Sarah pulled out her notebook again, turning to a fresh page. So, we help each other? She asked, beginning to write. You help me navigate the foundation setup, and I help you rebuild your relationship with Emma. Marcus extended his hand across the table. Deal. But I have one addition. This isn't just about money. I want to be involved in the foundation's development. Maybe Emma would too. She's always been passionate about helping others. As they shook hands, an announcement echoed through the lounge. Attention passengers of Pacific Airlines Flight PA-288. Weather conditions have improved, and we will begin boarding in 2 hours. Around them, passengers began stirring, collecting their belongings and forming lines at the restrooms. The spell of their overnight conversation was breaking, reality seeping back in. We should exchange contact information, Marcus said, suddenly businesslike again, but with a new warmth in his voice. My assistant will set up meetings to discuss the foundation details. Sarah wrote her number in his phone, then hesitated. Before we go back to being CEO and flight attendant, thank you. For listening, for caring, for wanting to help. Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that made him look years younger. Thank you for showing me what I've been missing while chasing success. He glanced at his watch, then added softly, sometimes the best business decisions happen at vending machines at dawn. As they prepared to return to their respective roles, both knew that this night had set something significant in motion. A promise had been made, not just of professional collaboration, but of personal transformation for them both. The resumed flight to New York felt markedly different from its beginning in Hong Kong. Sarah moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, but each time she passed Marcus's seat, their shared glances carried the weight of their overnight conversation. The other passengers remained unaware that their first-class flight attendant and the quiet CEO in one had spent hours sharing their deepest concerns in a Snowden, Alaskan airport. Marcus had returned to his laptop, but Sarah noticed he was no longer reading business reports. Instead, he was browsing his daughter Emma's school website, focusing on the upcoming theater production calendar. Occasionally, he would make notes in his phone, his expression softening whenever he came across a photo of Emma in previous performances. During meal service, Sarah placed his requested coffee on his tray. Lack, no sugar, she said professionally, then added in a lower voice, just like the vending machine version. A slight smile crossed his face. Though considerably better quality, he replied, then hesitated before adding, I've already emailed my assistant about clearing my schedule for next month's play. Sarah felt a warm surge of pride at his initiative. Emma will be surprised. Shocked is more likely, Marcus admitted quietly. I've already requested tickets. Front row as promised. Throughout the flight, Sarah found herself thinking about their discussion of the foundation. The notebook in her crew bag felt heavier now, carrying not just dreams but actual possibilities. During her break, she added more notes, inspired by their conversation about implementation and scale. As they began their descent into New York, the morning sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Sarah secured the cabin for landing, performing her final checks with practiced ease. When she reached Marcus's seat, he was staring out the window, his expression contemplative. "We're about to land, Mr. Sterling," she said, loud enough for other passengers to hear. "Please ensure your seatbelt is fastened." He nodded, then spoke softly so only she could hear. "I just texted Emma. Told her about being stranded in Alaska. She actually responded." He showed Sarah his phone screen, where a message read, "Oh, and Dad, that's crazy. Did you survive without your morning espresso?" Sarah smiled. "See? Sometimes honesty opens doors." After landing, Sarah watched as first-class passengers gathered their belongings. Marcus was one of the last to stand, deliberately taking his time. As other passengers filed past, he pulled a business card from his wallet and wrote something on the back. "My private number," he explained, handing it to her. "The foundation planning shouldn't go through corporate channels." He paused, then added, "And I might need advice about Emma." Sarah accepted the card, noting how different this felt from the numerous business cards she'd received from passengers over the years. This one carried the weight of shared confidences and mutual promises. "I'll be in touch about both," she assured him. "Don't forget about the play." "Front row," he confirmed, then surprised her by adding, "Thank you, Sarah, for seeing past the CEO to the failing father." "You're not failing," she corrected gently. "You're learning. We all are." As Marcus walked off the plane, Sarah noticed something different about his posture. The rigid corporate stance had softened slightly, as if some invisible burden had lifted from his shoulders. She understood the feeling. Her own dreams felt more tangible now, grounded in possibility rather than just hope. Later, as Sarah collected her crew bags and prepared to head home, she pulled out Marcus's business card. On the back, below his private number, he had written, "For new beginnings, both yours and mine." She carefully placed the card in her notebook, between pages of foundation plans and newly added notes. The exhaustion of the extended flight and unexpected detour finally hit her, but it was accompanied by a sense of anticipation. Something had shifted during that snowed night in Alaska, something that couldn't be undone. As she left the airport, Sarah looked up at the New York sky, so different from the snow-filled Alaskan one they'd watched together. She thought about how life's biggest changes often come disguised as inconveniences, and how sometimes the most important connections are made when plans go awry. The foundation of her dreams and a father's journey back to his daughter, both stories were just beginning. 1 year had passed since that fateful night in Anchorage. The Bridge of Hope Foundation, as Sarah had named it, now operated in 5 major cities, providing practical support to families battling cancer. The small notebook full of dreams had transformed into a thriving organization, helping hundreds of families navigate their darkest hours. Sarah stood in the Foundation's new Manhattan office, looking out over the city's skyline. The space hummed with activity as volunteers coordinated meal deliveries, arranged transportation for patients, and managed the daily logistics of supporting families in crisis. On her desk sat a framed photo from the Foundation's opening day, she and Marcus cutting a ribbon, while Emma Sterling surprisingly stood beside them, beaming with pride. The journey hadn't been simple. The first months were filled with legal meetings, paperwork, and countless hours of planning. Marcus had kept his promise, leveraging his connections and experience to help structure the organization. But he'd done more than just provide financial support. He'd become personally involved, often spending weekends visiting families alongside Sarah. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Meeting finished early. Emma's dress rehearsal starts in an hour. Want to join us?" Sarah smiled, remembering how different things had been a year ago. Marcus hadn't just attended Emma's performance of The Glass Menagerie. He'd shown up to every production since, slowly rebuilding his relationship with his daughter one play at a time. The change in their dynamic had been remarkable to witness. "On my way," she replied, gathering her things. As she walked through the office, she passed walls lined with thank you letters from families they'd helped. Each one reminded her of her mother and the struggles they'd faced together. Now, other families had the support system she'd once only dreamed of creating. The theater was across town, housed in Emma's high school. Sarah found Marcus waiting outside, holding 2 coffee cups, a callback to their vending machine breakfast that had started it all. "Perfect timing," he said, handing her one. "Emma's playing the lead in this one. She's nervous." They entered the auditorium, where students were running through final preparations. Emma, now 18, spotted them and waved from the stage. She looked so different from the angry teenager in the photos Marcus had shown Sarah a year ago. Theater had given Emma confidence, but it was her father's consistent presence that had brought back her smile. "Dad," Emma called out, jogging over during a break. "Sarah, you made it." She hugged them both, her costume rustling. "The foundation meeting went well?" "We're expanding to 2 more cities next month," Sarah shared. "Your father's connections with the hospital networks made it possible." Emma beamed at Marcus. "See, I told you all those boring business meetings would help someone eventually." Marcus laughed, something he did much more freely now. "Speaking of which, have you given any more thought to interning at the foundation this summer before college?" "Already filled out the application," Emma replied. "Sarah's been helping me prepare for the interview." The stage manager called for places, and Emma hurried back, but not before giving her father another quick hug. Sarah watched Marcus's face as he observed his daughter, seeing the peace that had replaced his former constant worry. "Sometimes I wonder," he said quietly, "what would have happened if that flight hadn't been diverted?" Sarah thought about it too sometimes. How a snowstorm in Alaska had changed so many lives. Not just theirs, but all the families the foundation now helped. "Life has a way of forcing us to land exactly where we need to be," she replied. They took their usual seats in the front row as the house lights dimmed. Marcus had rearranged countless business meetings to never miss these moments. His corporate reputation had shifted too. Articles now praised Sterling Innovations for its family-friendly policies and community involvement, inspired by its CEO's personal transformation. As the curtain rose, Sarah glanced at her friend. Marcus Sterling was still a powerful CEO, but he was also a father who showed up, a philanthropist who got his hands dirty, and a man who had learned that success could be measured in more ways than stock prices. The foundation's motto, written in Emma's flowing script, hung in their office. "Small acts of kindness bridge the biggest gaps." It was more than just a saying. It was the story of how an unexpected night had sparked changes that continued to ripple outward, touching more lives than anyone could have imagined. On a crisp autumn morning, remarkably similar to the one that had started it all 2 years ago, Sarah Chen walked through the familiar terminal of Hong Kong International Airport. She was no longer in her flight attendant uniform. Instead, she wore a smart business suit, her visitor's badge identifying her as the executive director of the Bridge of Hope Foundation. The foundation's annual board meeting had brought her back to where everything began. As she made her way to the conference room, she passed flight PA 288, smiling at the memories it stirred. A flight attendant caught her eye and waved. Many of Sarah's former colleagues now volunteered with the foundation, turning routine flights into opportunities to identify families who needed support. Inside the conference room, Marcus Sterling was already present, engaged in conversation with Emma, who had joined the foundation full-time after graduating high school. At 19, Emma had delayed college for a year to help establish youth support programs for children of cancer patients. Her personal experiences had shaped her into a passionate advocate for families in crisis. "Sarah," Emma called out, rushing to hug her. "Wait until you see the numbers from our new teenage support group program." Marcus watched their interaction with evident joy, a far cry from the isolated CEO Sarah had first met. "She's been up since dawn preparing the presentation," he said proudly. The meeting began, and Sarah listened as Emma confidently presented her findings. The foundation now operated in 12 cities across 3 countries, with plans for further expansion. What had started as notes in a small notebook had grown beyond anyone's expectations. "Last month alone," Emma reported, "we provided support to over 1,000 families. Transportation assistance, meal deliveries, child care during treatments, small things that make huge differences." Sarah noticed Marcus discreetly wiping his eyes when Emma showed videos of families sharing their stories. the mighty CEO of Sterling Innovations, had discovered that true strength often lay in allowing yourself to be moved by others' struggles and triumphs. After the meeting, the three of them stood by the airport's massive windows, watching planes take off and land. "Remember when you two were stuck in Alaska?" Emma asked, a question she loved to revisit. Dad was probably checking stock prices every 5 minutes. Actually, Marcus corrected, sharing a knowing look with Sarah. "I was learning about what really matters." Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from their latest support center in Sydney. Another family had been connected with local resources, another small bridge built over troubled waters. "It's amazing how many lives can change when people choose to help each other," she reflected. Speaking of change, Emma announced, "I've decided to study business and social work when I start college next fall. I want to learn how to make the foundation even better." Marcus wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders, no longer the distant father he had once been. "Your mother called yesterday," he said. "She's proud of what you're doing here." The mention of Lisa no longer carried the pain it once had. Time and personal growth had healed old wounds, allowing new relationships to flourish. Even Marcus's ex-wife had become a supporter of the foundation, recognizing the positive changes in both her former husband and their daughter. Sarah checked her watch. Soon another flight would board, carrying perhaps another family in need of support, another opportunity to help. The foundation had taught them all that life's most meaningful connections often came disguised as chance encounters. "We should head to the hospital," Sarah reminded them. They had a new family support center opening in the oncology wing of Hong Kong's largest hospital, a full-circle moment that brought their journey back to where Sarah's mother had once received treatment. As they gathered their belongings, Marcus paused. "You know, when I boarded that flight 2 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Success, power, influence. But I was missing the most important parts of life." "And now?" Emma asked, though she knew the answer. "Now I understand that true success isn't measured in quarterly reports." He smiled, looking at his daughter and the woman who had helped him find his way back to her. "It's measured in the lives we touch and the bridges we build." They walked together through the terminal, their footsteps echoing in the space where their story had begun. Behind them, Flight PA-288 prepared for takeoff, carrying new stories, new possibilities, and perhaps even new beginnings for others who, like them, would discover that life's most extraordinary journeys often start with an unexpected detour.